Okay, please be seated. I'll introduce Daniel. Daniel is a humanist minister and founder of the Spiritual Naturalist Society. He's a speaker and writer on topics of ethics, spirituality, and ancient philosophy. Daniel has studied comparative religion, specializing in the overlap of concepts between Buddhism, Stoicism, since 2005. His personal practice includes elements of both and other traditions. Daniel has taught and led meditation at the VA hospital and other venues. He also leads the English Dharma Group meditation program on the first and third Sunday and continues to speak on contemporary Buddhist topics frequently. Daniel.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for having me. So I'll put this like that. It's good to be back. It's been a while for me. So today, our talk is going to be on right effort. So let's start with a simple truth. What a person considers and reflects upon for a long time, to that his mind will bend and incline. That's from the Buddha himself and I'm going to unfortunately not be very good at pronouncing a lot of the suttas and parts of the Pali Canon, but that's from the Buddha himself in the Vedhavitaka Sutta. In other words, what we think about over and over shapes our minds, our actions, and ultimately our lives. Today we're going to talk about right effort, one of the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. The Buddhist Guide to Ending Suffering. Now, when we hear the word effort, we tend to think about pushing hard, pushing ourselves, striving, struggling. But I think there was a reason why it's not strong effort or hard effort or strenuous effort, but it's right effort. So the point isn't that it's like this difficult struggle and we have to apply ourselves in this difficult struggle. That's not what the concept of right effort is about. Instead, it's about cultivating the right kind of energy, the right kind of discipline to train the mind and free ourselves from unnecessary suffering. The 4 aspects of right effort. The Buddha breaks right effort down into 4 key steps, sometimes called the 4 great efforts. And I'll just list them and then we can go into them. The first is preventing unwholesome states from arising. The second, abandoning unwholesome states that have already arisen. The third, generating wholesome states that have not yet arisen. I think you can see a pattern here. And then the fourth, maintaining and strengthening wholesome states that have already exist. So let's take a closer look at each one of these. The first, preventing unwholesome states from arising. This means being mindful of what conditions lead to negative states like anger, greed, confusion, anxiety, frustration, impatience, and then stopping them before they start. Think about when you're exhausted or stressed. Those are the times when we're most likely to snap at someone, make a bad decision, or get lost in bad habits. The Buddha put it simply, quote, "Whatever a person frequently thinks about and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of their mind." That's from the Majjhima Nikaya 19. If we constantly feed our minds with negativity through the news, toxic relationships, harmful entertainments, our minds will bend toward those patterns. I just want to take a sidestep because probably out of the things that I listed, the news would be the most universally problematic issue right now. You know, of course, it's kind of a conundrum because good citizens want to stay aware of what's going on. You want to keep yourself informed, but there's a balance there, you know, and so you want to be mindful of when you're getting lost in a constant stream of going back to it over and over again, the same things. Nothing new's happened, but you're reading the same stories again and again, those kinds of things. But really that applies to everything. Thoughts in our mind that we go over and over again, conversations that we hold in our mind with the things we wish we had said to the other person that we're in a toxic relationship with, those sorts of things. If we constantly feed our minds with negativity, then our minds will bend toward those patterns. So we need to protect ourselves just as we wouldn't willingly drink poison. We're thinking about what kind of situation am I putting myself in? How am I spending my time? Looking for those warning signs and then being mindful about planning out what you will and won't attend to, both in terms of your eyes and your time and your mind, those sorts of things. Abandoning unwholesome states that have already arisen. That's the second of the 4 items I listed. So let's be real. Sometimes negativity sneaks in. Maybe we're already frustrated. We're already fearful. We're already angry. We already have those habits and inclinations built up in our reactions and the way we handle things. So I've noticed with myself, as I've gotten older, I think I've become aware of grumpy old man syndrome sneaking in. Sometimes I'll just notice that I'm grumpy. I'm just short, patient, reacting to everything with kind of a hostility or grumpiness. And so I've started asking myself, wait a minute, why am I grouchy right now? There's nothing happening that should make me grouchy. I'm just grouchy. Why? You know, so learning to go into an analytical state in that moment and catching yourself and watching yourself. It was like, not in a self-blaming way or an admonishing way, but just sort of like a good habit of having that second eye, watching yourself and saying, okay, well, maybe I'm just not going to say anything for a while until I can figure out what it is I'm feeling. Why am I feeling this way? Could it just be a blood pressure thing? Could it be I didn't get enough sleep? Or is there some reason, something that I'm really angry about that's not the thing that I'm talking about with the other person right now, you know? So that self-analysis. Right effort teaches that once those feelings arise, we don't have to be stuck with them. In Anguttara Nikaya 4.14, the Buddha says, just as a carpenter shapes wood, so too does one train the mind. We shape the mind over time by catching negative thoughts and consciously shifting them. And in that way, we build up a habit, a mental habit, kind of change those reactions. And that's how it is different from just a continuous difficult effort. Instead, it's more like a river flowing over a rough rock that eventually becomes smooth. You just stay consistent with the practice, consistent with the mindfulness, and over time, things will shape into what they need to be. And the thing that they're shaping into is your mental, your natural reactions and thoughts about situations as they arise. The difficult thing is when something arises and you're triggered and you go into a thing and then you have to pull it back and you have to analyze and you're looking at it after the fact, or you have to maybe hold something in. That's difficult. But the larger background practice of what's going on, the shaping of the wood, that is something that is shaping toward a habit of reaction that is consistent with the wisdom of the Dharma. So that when eventually what you start to notice over time, more and more and more, is that something arises that might have sent you into a panic or fearful state or angry state, and it didn't. Not because you exerted this strong effort, but simply because that's not who you are anymore. You've shaped that. You just naturally react in a wiser way without the effort, because you've applied this long-term shaping effort. So the third thing, generating wholesome states that have not yet arisen. So this step is about actively creating positive mental habits. It doesn't come out of some problem that you're trying to address and that you're having right now. So that's more like aspirational. I like to, one of the things that I want to be for myself, that I've noticed that I really admire in certain individuals. There's certain people once in a while that you meet that they have this trait where whoever they're with is the most important person to them at that time, and they make the other person feel that way. I've noticed that in certain people, and I personally just really admire that when I notice that about people, that they give their full attention and they make the person feel listened to and cared for. There's few people in the world that really do that extremely well. And I would like to be more like that. And I'm often not, because I'm in my head a lot, And they don't necessarily know that I do value them and how I feel about them. So I'd like to exhibit that. I'd like to be more like that kind of a person. So that's an aspirational thing, so that I look for ways to try to shape that in myself and my habits. Just as we might start a new fitness routine to strengthen the body, we can train the mind toward kindness, patience, wisdom, and we can get more specific with those things too. One of the best ways to do this is loving kindness meditation, or metta. The Buddha said, "Develop the meditation on loving kindness, for it glows, it shines, and it blazes forth." Said that in the Samyutta Nikaya 46.54. Simply repeating phrases like, may I be happy, may others be happy, can shift our mindset over time. I also do little things like, that's in a meditation setting where you set aside time, you sit down and meditate, you do loving kindness meditation. I also like to do what I call integrated practices, little practices that you integrate into your day, Thich Nhat Hanh released a series of little cards that you can set up around the house that remind you of things. And one of the ones I liked the most was washing the dishes is like bathing baby Buddha. used to hate washing the dishes, and now I do it without the machine because to take the time and sit there and just enjoy the water, think about the fact that not everyone has dishes, not everyone has running water, appreciating that. That's an integrated practice. Another one is, and I guess I have learned from Catholics on this who see an ambulance and they do the cross. Well, I don't do the cross, it's not my tradition, but what I do is when I see an ambulance on the road, I breathe in deeply. I can't close my eyes because I'm driving. I breathe in deeply and I let it out slowly. One breath meditation. And during that breath, this is the important part, breathing isn't a big deal, but during the breath, I'm focused on may that person be well and safe. That's somebody in trouble there when I see those sirens. So what that does, though, is it continuously draws my attention back to the fact that there's something more important than that the traffic is now slower and inconvenienced by the sirens, and then I'm going to be 30 seconds later to my destination. It puts things in perspective and shifts me out of the ego state of thinking from the inside out about me to the larger Buddha mind thinking of the bigger situation, what's really important, what's not important, and the relative relationships of those things. And so by just building a little habit like that and integrating it into your life, you find that you start to go from just seeing that in that moment, it starts to bleed out over time, that mind state, so that in between those little practices, it starts to bleed out and meet up in the gaps. And over time, you'll start to see that you're just naturally that way. Another thing I think about too, you're driving down the road and sometimes you see an animal that's been killed on the side of the road or hit on the side of the road. And if you see that and you feel sorry or bad for that animal, that's good. That's like step one, because if you didn't feel anything, then maybe work on some practices about empathy. But that's good because that means you're empathetic. But then there's another step beyond that, which is that the only reason you see that animal is because that area is paved. And in reality, all of the trees back further in there, they have dead animals all throughout them. And there's dead human beings all over the world. This is going on all the time. It's part of the cycle of life and death. So you've been reminded of something that's true all the time in that moment. Your shock at that is a measure of how unmindful of that truth you were the moment before you saw it. So the difference in your emotional state between those two moments, if you start to condition your mindfulness such that the distinction between those two moments starts to become minimized, not because you're caring less about the entity that was killed, but because you're caring more during the times where you weren't thinking about it, then what you'll find is that you're always walking through a universe of joyful births and mournful loss happening all the time, all around us, making every moment sacred, like a funeral or a birth. And so just look for those moments where things sharply remind you of something that you could be mindful of all the time. So the fourth item, maintaining and strengthening wholesome states. So, we've made some progress, all of us, to some degree. We've been practicing Buddhism or other sources of wisdom that we've learned in our lives that people have taught us or that we've worked on. Hopefully we all have some degree of progress on that path. And so it's also good to take a survey of that. Not in a prideful way, hopefully, but just in a realistic way of, yeah, I'm really glad that I've made this progress. So how can we maintain it? Because just like the earlier example of having a fitness program at a gym, if you don't keep it up, that muscle atrophies over time. I've noticed if I go a long time without maintaining a good meditation habit, that it starts to show. You definitely notice that these skills degrade. The world is always, not just the world, but also that aspect of the world that is the lizard brain, the child self, the primitive self, that lower part of the brain that acts more selfish, animalistic, the ego, however you want to frame that, is always pulling us back, always trying to rise up and take control. And the world conspires with it to pull our attention toward those things. You need these things. The commercials tell you need these, you need more money, you need to have what your coworker has, you need to have these possessions. Everything is about getting this money so I can pay off this bill, and getting what everyone else has, this sort of thing. The world is all about this exchange of commodities and goods and material situations. And so all of these things, and not just material, but also competing egos. This person's always stealing the spotlight from me, or this person's always making me feel bad, or, all of these things that happen are constantly putting us into a frame of mind where that little snake inside of us that's trying to come up and take control is going, see this over here? This means you got to pay more attention to money. See this over here? This person's insulting you. That little part inside you is always pointing out those things and trying to take advantage of them. And then making you go, yeah, I guess you were right. Why don't you take control? And so that constant force, both from within and from without, causes a attrition of our wisdom if we don't do what this fourth item is talking about, maintaining and strengthening wholesome states that we already currently have, got to maintain. Once we develop good habits, we need to keep them going. That way we don't fall back into old patterns. The Buddha gave a simple metaphor, quote, like a potter refining clay, so too does one refine the mind through effort. That's from the Anguttara Nikaya 6.55. Just as a potter keeps shaping the clay, we keep shaping our minds. And so those are the four kinds of effort. The other thing I want to talk about is finding balance in right effort. Effort doesn't mean forcing or straining, as I said earlier. The Buddha actually warned against pushing too hard. He gave the example of a lute, a string instrument. If the strings are too tight, they'll snap. If they're too loose, they won't play. So just as a lute must be tuned not too tight or too loose. So too must effort be balanced. So having a realistic assessment of where we are. There's been a few times in my own practice and journey that I've thought, yeah, an enlightened being would do that. But if I force myself into doing that, I'm not really going to be doing it for the right reasons or the right impulse. I'm not that advanced. So maybe I can come at this from a longer term perspective and be realistic about it. Don't get confused about exterior actions or how they look. A lot of times what we do is we say, well, a wise person would go, oh, and they would smile and they would do these things and they'd say these things. And so we think if we mimic that, if we play act it like you're in a play, pretend by acting that way exteriorly, that's how you're going to get there. And that's how we end up fooling ourselves sometimes. We get into these situations where all that's really happening is the steam inside is just building up, till one day, rah, you just explode. Or you collapse the opposite direction. So anytime you're looking away from something or denying something or ignoring something, that's a sure sign that you've strayed from Dharma, because Dharma is all about being aware of whatever the truth is, good or bad, and accepting it and then moving forward with that. We see this all the time. Some people burn themselves out, meditating for hours a day, trying to force enlightenment. Others don't try at all. It can be exhausting if you think that that's what you have to do. The middle way is key. Not too much, not too little. And what that is different for everyone, depending on where you are in your journey. And you may be very far along on some aspects and not very far along on other aspects. Certain kinds of traits. Maybe you're not greedy at all, you're very generous, but you're also short-tempered. An effort has to be wise effort. The Buddha said, one with wrong effort struggles in vain, but one with right effort progresses on the path. Anguttara Nikaya 4.17. It's not just about working hard, it's about working smart. You've probably heard that. So that's what that is. How to apply right effort in daily life. Okay, so here's some tips for that. In our modern world, number one, we can be mindful of what influences us. Be mindful of what influences you. If you notice that certain situations bring out anger, jealousy, anxiety, etc., limit your exposure to them. Now, later you may find that you've made some progress with the other practices in the background, the shaping of the wood practices, the longer term practice. And then you can go back into that environment if you need to. And for you now, you're okay there. But recognizing that you're not that far along yet in certain other areas, saying, I've just wandered onto the pro tennis court and I'm a beginner tennis player. You move yourself back, be aware of those things. So don't go into situations or set yourself up in situations where if you know you're tempted, that that's going to be a problem for you until you've made that progress. And okay, let me see if I can do that. Number two, practice letting go. When you catch yourself stuck in a negative emotion, don't fight it, just acknowledge it and then release it. I've noticed that meditation that we do, the mindfulness meditation, breathing meditation, all of the details of that and how it works are remarkably analogous to so many other things in the practice. And this is one of those examples. It's just like when you're trying to meditate and thoughts come up. You don't go, oh no, a thought has come up. Why am I thinking about this? Because that's just more thoughts. You just acknowledge it, stay aware of it, and you let it pass, and it goes. So just releasing without surprise or shock that it's arisen, or shame or anger that it's arisen. Just be aware, acknowledging, and let it go. Number 3, actively cultivate positive states. Take time each day to reflect on gratitude, kindness, and mindfulness, even in small ways. One of the easy things is you notice a pretty sunset, or the clouds are real beautiful, or look how the light shimmers off that water. Little things like that. You might be on your way to the hospital to treat some issue or see somebody who's you love, and this could be all kinds of situations. But if you stop in the middle of it and take in things like that, or there's a thing I like to do that I call harvesting happiness. If you're in an ego state where it's all about you and your needs and your goals, then you're stuck with just when the things that meet that happen, you're happy. When they don't, you're not. It's a very limited kind of thing, because that's the only source of your happiness. But if you're opened up with empathy and compassion and connection and acknowledging the interconnectedness of all things, and then you can harvest happiness going on all around you. I think I've talked about this a long time ago, but I was in the middle of I guess maybe early part of my practice, and I was starting to make some progress with one of the things I had consciously said that I wanted to do was increase my sense of empathy and work on empathy. Because I noticed it seemed so easy for some people. They were just naturally very empathetic, and I noticed the difference between that and myself thinking about my concerns all the time. So I wanted to work on building that muscle. And I guess I'd kind of entered into a lot of states in my meditations and things like that. And so I was kind of in that frame of mind when I went into a Starbucks, and the line was really long, like longer than usual. And normally I would have been frustrated and would have gotten on my phone right away. Because while you're standing in the line, I'm just wasting time standing in line, might as well be on my phone. So, but I didn't. I decided, I'm going to not get on my phone right now. I'm just going to kind of be mindful of my surroundings. And so I was standing in line and I was looking around, and I noticed people sitting at tables having conversations. Started thinking about, they look happy. That's nice. Good friends. And I looked up at the front of the line, and I saw someone getting their drink, and they got their drink and they went like this, and they took a little sip, and you could tell they liked it. And I noticed, I felt happy for them, that they must be really happy. They got their drink and everything. So I thought, this is really kind of special. I'd just been reading in the news about this war-torn area where they were having trouble getting access to clean water. And here we are in this environment, so privileged to be able to come in, get a coffee, just like we like it. Not too much of this, a little bit more of that. Need a little milk, a little cinnamon, all these different little things that we want. Everybody gets it. They're talking with friends, and they go away with their drink. And I thought about how lucky we all were to be there. So then I started focusing on the people at the front of the line. And each time the next one came up and got their drink, how happy they looked to finally get their drink after waiting on a long time. So now this entire experience of me going through this long line was just happiness, 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 harvesting their happiness right up to the time I got there, instead of going, come on, how long does it take to get your money out? All that kind of stuff. Totally different experience. And it really stuck with me because it wasn't just something I was choosing to think about. It was kind of a natural it kind of emerged naturally because of the mind states that I've been practicing. And so when it happened, it didn't feel like I had to go dig it up. It felt like something that just popped up, and it was eye-opening. It was more like you were seeing something you hadn't noticed before. So, that's what I mean by cultivating positive states, even in small ways. And then number 4, keep practicing. Right effort isn't a one-time thing, it's about consistency. I used to really have an issue with that, with any kind of habit I was building. I'd think, I'm building this habit, I'm doing so good. And then one day I mess up, I cheat, I don't do the thing I was supposed to do, I miss my meditation, I eat the thing I wasn't supposed to eat, I was doing all the stuff I didn't, and now I've ruined it. Now I might as well just give in, because I've broken my streak, I've ruined my practice. It's all ruined now. That was kind of my mindset. When I realized that that's how I was thinking, I thought, well, that's silly. So instead, this is just like, okay, it didn't happen this time. You just go back to doing it again. And you just go back. And then just like with meditation, you're focusing on the breath. Thoughts come up. You get lost in the thoughts. Okay, there they are. Let them pass. Bring it back to the breath. Oh, it happened again. Okay, bring it back to the breath. Without complaining about how often it's happened or how much it's happened or how you have to keep bringing it back to the breath, you just bring it back to the breath. Bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. And it's just like that with practice. You'll falter, you'll mess up, you'll skip, you'll fall out of the practice. Just bring it back, bring it back. And then over time, with all these interruptions and whatever things, you'll have that overarching thing. And you'll keep shaping the wood, or the river will keep, maybe the river stops sometimes, there's a dam, and then it goes again, or it rains, or it doesn't rain. But all of that averages out, it washes out, and over time, you just keep shaping. You can't ruin your practice. It's always there for you to do in every situation. The Buddha put it perfectly, do not be reckless in exertion, nor too lax. Seek balance. So in closing, to sum up, right effort is about training the mind, stopping negativity before it starts, letting go of negativity that's already there, creating positive habits, and keeping those habits strong. And here's one final thought from the Dhammapada. With effort, wisdom flourishes. Without effort, wisdom fades away. The path to wisdom, to peace, to true happiness, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens through effort, through training the mind, one thought at a time. So, as you leave here today, ask, where's my effort going? Am I feeling old habits of stress, or am I fueling and feeding old habits of stress, anger, and distraction? Or am I guiding my mind toward clarity, kindness, and peace? And that's the kind of effort we need to build the kind of life we want to create for ourselves. Thank you. We can do Q&A now, I guess. Thanks.
Any questions?
I'll also try to look and see if I see any hands raised on the. Yes.
Could you explore being exposed to poisons, like the balance between removing oneself completely from society to avoid those kind of stimulations, or finding your way and keeping balance while it's all coming in?
Oh, so the idea of maybe kind of like a vaccine where you're building up your immunity. Yeah, I think there can be a utility to that. To me, it's more like a testing, putting the dipstick in there, seeing where your oil level is. It's like you move in, or you're wondering how good of a swimmer am I? You go out a little deeper into the pool, start to have some trouble, so you back out. But then, so it can be a testing thing like that. I don't think there's, if you, for example, say, I'm going to put myself in angry situations that make me angry, if you practice being angry, you'll get good at being angry. So you want to avoid that,
Flip it to, I need to participate in something where everybody else is angry. That's also.
Oh. Yeah, so like you're the one level-headed person that's helping everybody else too. That can be a compassionate thing to do, sure.
That assumes I keep my balance.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's a book by Pema Chodron called The Places That Scare You.
I have it.
You have that? I love that book. It talks about how to go into difficult, scary places, not necessarily physical places, but situations where your help is needed. And so by being crushed by that, you're not able to then give help. So a whole bunch of techniques for that, sure. There's somebody on here, if they have their hand raised here? Okay, do I have to hit something to ask to unmute?
They can just speak up if they hit their.
Okay, yes, please.
Yes, Felipe and David. Thank you very much. I haven't seen you for a while, so we're very glad you're back. I hope you will come back again.
Yes.
I appreciate your talk and enjoy your talk very much. You have done a lot of reading that can share with us that are so meaningful. My couple of questions is, in your practice, do you find yourself, we all have a kind of a busy life. Are you able to meditate a lot more than, say, a few years ago? Does that help with kind of, like your 4 points about the right effort? I believe a lot of us intellectually it's easy to understand, but to make the same 4 points, understand it deeply, I believe it comes through this thing called stillness and mindfulness. Can you talk a little bit about how do you really understand it beyond intellectual? Correct. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for the question. So where the rubber meets the road, like how do you actually do this? We have busy lives and everything. I love the quote. I think it was the Buddha. Oh no, who was it? It might have been. Maybe you can tell me because some of you probably heard this quote. I think a person should meditate once a day unless they're really busy, in which case they should meditate twice a day. And it might have been the Dalai Lama. I can't remember. But anyway, a lot of times when we say we're busy and we end up not getting as much out of the time we're busy as we think we are. Whether we take that moment to organize our desk or to take that moment to organize our mind, then we find that, sure, on a clock, we've got a little less time now. But during the time where we're going to be busy, it's productive busy because we've got everything in order. We've got everything organized. It's the same thing with our minds. So these are like investments. They're not expenses, they're investments. I've invested some portion of my time and I get back more efficiency out of that. That's if you're looking at things in terms of being busy, that's one thing. The other thing is you don't necessarily have to do your ideal idea of meditation all the time with perfection. You can minimize that and have something, just something that you're doing as a seed, just so that you're getting that regularity. And then that can grow and flourish over time. Maybe give it a little more time, or maybe do something different, or something a little better, kind of hone what you're doing. And then the third thing is the integrated stuff I was talking about. So you're waiting in line at the tire store to get a new tire on your car. Why not do a little meditation while you're doing that? Those little times where you can fit things in like that are another way to make a lot of progress. With me, one of the things that I've noticed is there was a time in my life where I was really going good. I had my practice. I had every morning was, clockwork. I had everything. I had reading time, I had exercise time. It was very, I don't want to say rigid, because I didn't feel like it was rigid. I'd gotten into the habit. So it was like everything was good. It was going. And then real life broke in, and I had to make exceptions, and things started falling apart and all this kind of stuff. So when I noticed the difference when you have a routine, when you have, every morning I'm going to wake up here, I'm going to go to bed here, I'm going to wake up here, I'm going to do my meditation. That's very productive. But one of the things I've been working on lately is I thought, why is it so hard for me to get back into that kind of so consistent, rigid kind of thing? And it's because the word rigid now does feel a little more accurate, because I've fallen out of that. So I noticed one of the things is that anytime I start doing a practice exactly the same every day, it makes me feel like time is flying by, and I've now gone a whole week, just went by like that. I don't want to feel that way, but I do, because when things are the same all the time, your mind notices less incidents happening, because it goes on autopilot. And even though these are mindfulness practices, or they're things, it's still, because of the sameness of it, makes you feel like nothing new has happened. And so your brain feels like less time has passed, and you're just zooming through everything, So what I've been thinking about now is a practice that's both consistent and variable, or that has some changes in it. Maybe on certain days you do different things. I've even thought about using a deck of cards that have things, so I don't know what's going to happen next, but it's going to go through all the things, and then it goes back, you reshuffle the deck. So you're doing them with the right frequency, but it creates a kind of vitality to things. So that might be an easier way to make sure I'm getting all these practices in and not feel humdrum or boring about it, Anyway, I hope that addresses a little bit of at least thoughts that I've had about that kind of thing. Anyone else? I thought I saw a hand earlier.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
I really enjoyed your talk.
Thank you.
Not only did you provide wisdom, but you also made it really clear. You expressed it in a good manner by integrating your life experiences with it. My question is about right effort. How do you balance out putting in enough effort and also not going overboard? Because sometimes I feel like I use the excuse I shouldn't go overboard, but I use it as an excuse of being lazy.
Yeah, we rationalize with ourselves all the time. And if you think about this needle as being, exactly the right amount for you at this moment in life, which changes. So that's kind of hard to define. But you think about that, the people who are on this side over here that aren't applying enough effort and need to apply more, and then the people over here who are applying too much and they need to pull it back, those are very different kinds of situations with very different needs. the right medicine for the right ailment, right? So if we trick ourselves into, if we're a hypochondriac, we think we have too much effort and we need less. Or if we are, it's the opposite of a hypochondriac, the person who's not paying enough attention to themselves, letting themselves go, and we think we're putting in too much, or we think we're not putting in enough, but we need more, we're over stressing ourselves. We've now taken the opposite medicine for the ailment that we have, you know. So I think the first order of business is the diagnosis, you know, making sure that we're really being honest with ourselves about which side of that needle we're on. And it might be more complicated than that. It could be maybe in one area we're doing too much, but in another area we're not doing enough. Because when we talk about a practice, it's not just one thing, it's a lot of different things. We're addressing all kinds of different aspects of ourselves. We're addressing our empathy, we're addressing our emotional reactions, we're addressing our wisdom. How much are we learning? Are we reading? Are we learning new things? That's the intellectual side of things. There's so many different aspects to what, you know, a spiritual practice, a life practice works on. So we need to break those down. We need to think about them. We need to think about our lives. And then I would look at, like, how do you feel? The very fact that you're asking the question is good, because it means that you're at least at the stage where you're recognizing, maybe I'm just telling myself that, you know. So that's already a big piece of progress right there. The fact that you can even ask that question. And then, so it comes down to mindfulness and being honest with yourself. Don't worry about judgment or shame or anything like that, because there's nothing, sometimes that clouds our ability to be honest with ourselves, because we try to worry about judging ourselves. I would try to let that go. Don't worry about, there's no shame in whatever level you're at. So that frees you now to then just look at it honestly, see what it is. And once you kind of, you know, learn that about yourself, that you fully accept that it's okay, whatever level, whatever you're doing. If you've been telling yourself one thing, it's all okay. The key thing is that we're going to just be accurate. We're going to look at it like it is. And then once you start doing that, I think then you'll be able to identify where you're at, on which side of the needle you're at on these different things. Take some time to just maybe even get a sheet of paper or just think about, list out these different things and where do you stand on them. And then if you decide that you have been inaccurate and this is what's really going on, you think, and this is what needs to be done, don't jump ahead and start, well, how in the world am I going to do that? I've got to do this, you know, worrying about the practical aspects of it. Just stay at one stage at a time. And then once you figure out, oh, this would be ideal for me to work on this, for me to not overstress myself on these things, you know. And then once you figure that out, now you've got a plan, or a goal, I should say, and now you can move to the plan stage where you actually look at your life and you say, okay, here's what I do on Monday, here's what I do on Tuesday. When we talk about having a practice, you know, one of the things that I love about Buddhism is that it's one of these, what do you call it, like a wisdom philosophy or something, but it's one of these practices. I grew up in a conservative Southern Christian background, and there are Christian practices, but the way religion was taught to us was that it was a laundry list of beliefs. I believe this, I believe this, I believe this, and because I have these opinions, that makes me a Christian. And so when I grew up, I thought that's what religion was all about, you know. You got to have the right laundry list of opinions about things, and that determines where you fit and what you are. But then what I was so relieved to find out in Buddhism is that it was not so much about that, it was more about what you do. how you practice, and why you practice, a pragmatic practice designed to do something, to have an effect and a result. And that blew my mind when I first discovered that, because that's a whole different way of, the other thing is more of an ego thing. Here's what I think, and therefore I'm going to have this flag like I'm cheering for a football team or something, So the fact that it's a practice that you work on means that you can just look at the results and you don't have to worry about how good of a Buddhist you are or anything like that. But what it also means is that if you have a practice, and it's not just, well, I believe this and that makes me a Buddhist, but you have an actual practice. The way you know a person who has a practice is you look at their calendar, and maybe it's not technically on the calendar, but you look at how they're spending their time. And if there are notable distinctions between how you spend your time, if you've actually done something different than you would have if you were just living moment to moment, then you know that you're living a Buddhist life, or you're actively practicing a practice. And that's what matters in terms of getting those outcomes, not telling something, well, I believe this, that makes me a Buddhist. So that's what I would do. I'd start with the diagnosis. Well, no, actually before that, I would start with expunging any kinds of notions of fear or shame or judgment about oneself. That has no functionality, no usefulness. Then now you're clear to move on to diagnosis. What's the truth? What am I really doing here? When I rationalize and I say, I don't need this because of this, what's the motivation behind that? Where's that coming from? Is that really true? And you might find that it is true. Or you might find, no, that's coming from that ego, or it's coming from that little snake that's trying to get up there and tell me things and take control. Maya, trying to do things. And then after you do the diagnosis, you set the goals. After you set the goals, now you look at the practical stuff. You open up the calendar. You say, okay, what can we really do here to start? And don't go crazy. Don't start living like you're in a retreat 24/7. Just say, let me think about sustainability more than amount. What can I do that I know I'll be easy to keep to, and do it? And then later, if you want, you can ramp it up a little bit. You can meditate a little bit longer, or you can add a day of doing something else, but just start with some seedling of consistency, some seedling of practice, and then you can just let it grow. That's what I would do.
Thank you, Danny. Any other questions here? Why don't we stand? Three bows. One to the Buddha, to the Dharma, and to the Sangha. Thank you all.
Thank you.